Former Victorian Police Commissioner Ken Lay is one of Victoria's longest-serving public sector leaders. And just last week, Lay announced that he would be stepping down from his roles as chair of Forensicare and of Ambulance Victoria. But for someone held in such high regard by Dan Andrews, Lay's departure for Ambulance Victoria at such a critical time with the service under continued criticism seems bizarre. Lay was also looking at the emergency 000 system. And we need to ask, is Lay's resignation another Andrews political assassination? Or did Lay find his position no longer tenable? Or does Andrews' drug injecting rooms become a higher priority? Joining us to discuss Ken Lay's resignation is CEO of the Community Advocacy Alliance and former VicPol top cop, Ivan Ray. Morning, Ivan.
Good morning.
Now, what do you make of Ken Lay's sudden departure?
Well, I think it's confusing because I've never met Ken Lay, so I don't know him as a man at all, as an individual rather. But there was an effusive report in the papers praising Ken for his services to the state, and all of the roles he's participated in would appear by that overview to have been highly successful. And it would seem to me to be rather odd to remove somebody of his caliber, according to their own material, from such an important role when there is huge problems in that particular service.
Yeah, we can definitely say that despite all of Ken Lay's best efforts, the ambulance service is still in critical condition.
Well, the media reports would indicate that, and that's what really surprised me when Ken was moved out, or he voluntary or pushed off, I've no idea. But when he ceased to be in the ambulance service, I mean, if what they are saying is right in the effusive statements they have made about his performance, it just seems totally illogical to not make arrangements. Perhaps the workload was too great. You would take away the less important matters, you would have thought, and leave him to focus on fixing the ambulance service. But I mean, he has got the 000 problem as well, and that doesn't seem to be. And I've got no idea what's happening with that. I don't think there's been very much in the media about it at all. But obviously that hasn't resolved itself, I wouldn't have thought. The same as a number of other portfolios he has, and for the safe injecting rooms, that's another big issue that he's dealing with, and we keep getting told there are delays in being able to release that information to the public. Now, a cynic might say that's a political manoeuvre, but I'd suggest that it's more to do with the fact that perhaps he hasn't got the job done as yet because of the workload he's carrying.
For all those that support the safe injecting rooms, it's a very hard proposition to sell to those who will be affected by the location of it. A lot of the CBD traders, and I think even Sally Capp has come out and said she has some concerns. So we need to ask whether the delay is unavoidable, or is it somehow beneficial?
It's funny you should use the word delay, because one of the nicknames, and it wasn't terribly nice, but one of the nicknames Ken had was Ken Delay. Now, I've never served under him, so I don't know whether that was right or not, but I have heard on a number of occasions a nickname that he was given. But the injecting rooms are more than just the people that are affected directly, and I'm talking about the traders. The broader community has very strong views on the issue of these injecting rooms. Our view is that they tend to be a last resort. It's where the people who are the decision makers in our community have thrown up their hands and just given up on the drug issue. There are all sorts, and we've put forward ways in which the drug issue could be addressed more effectively. But certainly we don't see that the safe injecting rooms are a way of reducing the problem. It in fact feeds the model, the marketing model of the drug cartels. They're putting all of their customer base in geographical locations, the vicinity of an injecting room, and the ability of the people to duck in there so they can't be prosecuted for carrying drugs. Now, I have a fundamental problem with the fact that we have a state-sanctioned illegal activity, which is using and carrying and possessing drugs for defendants. There's still statutes on the books, but the state has organised to bypass all that, and I have difficulty with that. You start doing that to all sorts of applications of the law, and you've got real problems. So that's the first point. The second point is that there appears, from what I can find anyway, no rehabilitation or correction of this adverse behaviour. Now, until something like that, if there was a direct correlation between the number of people that went to a safe injecting room and the number of people who were removed off the drugs of dependence, then I might mellow a little. But as it stands now, it's just a free-for-all. That's all I can see it as, is that, yes, they argue that people don't overdose as regular, or if they do, they're in a controlled environment. I've seen no evidence that the overall loss of life through overdoses has been reduced across the state. It might have reduced some around the actual rooms themselves, but not in the broader community. And the drug scourge is right across everywhere in the community. So until such time as they can demonstrate that it has some benefit to the broader community for what the price that the community has to pay to operate it, and what the community has to put up with it being located near it, then I'm afraid I'm opposed to the whole concept.
It doesn't seem to make sense when they say we need to treat it as a health problem rather than a law and order problem, but they haven't got a concurrent increase in rehabilitation places or anything like that. So there's, as you say, there's no referral, there's no ongoing treatment. So it's one piece of the puzzle without the next step for them to go to.
Well, I think it's an opt-out too. Look, we're doing something, and they're really not doing very much at all other than facilitating the use of drugs, and that's really not on, in my view. We've put forward a proposal where places like the building in the Uralla building in the city and the quarantine facility at Micklam could be converted very easily to a facility to deal with the drug problem. And that's not the rehabilitation, it's the actually dealing with it at the coalface, you know, somewhere where people can get treated as a health issue, that their health can be assessed and evaluated, and they be encouraged and provided with access to other resources. Now, we know that there is a lack of these sorts of rehabilitation resources in the state. But of course, a lot of these, it's our understanding, is that a lot of the places in these facilities are taken up by drug addicts who offend or offenders, criminal offenders. And part of their intent is to go to court that they're actually getting rehabilitated. Very rarely do they follow through. They're doing it simply to minimise the impact of any sentence. Now, that needs to be tightened right up. We're spending a fortune on relocating a problem, not fixing it.
Now, recently the Ombudsman announced an inquiry into whether political appointees have been put through the public service. Do you think Ken Lay risks being tarred with that brush?
Look, I think that the Watts report clearly indicated that the political appointments are rife. I think that I read somewhere recently, 95 people who are leaders or in charge of parts of government were appointed politically rather than on merit. And when you read the Watts report, it sets out all of the jobs that were provided at all levels because of who you are and what you are. And nepotism was rife, and even to the degree that they discovered there were people there that were appointed to positions that never actually did anything or had the ability to perform the function to which they were appointed. Now, I'm in the process of writing an analysis of that report, and what struck me as very, very wrong is that whilst the IBAC and the Ombudsman identified all of these positions that were given to relatives or to appachiks that were loyal to the actual party that was employing them and all that, so rather than on merit, under excuse me, under the rules of the public service employment process, these people were identified, but just continue on. There's no effort, and this is what really frustrates people like us, is that no effort to go and say, right, well, look, all these positions that are questionable, why don't we re-advertise them all? The person that's in that position can apply for it and they might well get it again, but at least this time around, they'll get it on merit, and that it be done through the proper appointment processes, not because I'm your best mate or you could go and recruit X number of more people for my branch, the branch stacking issue. But of course, the Watts report comes out in some 258 pages or something, which I've read. And that's quite a few hours of my life I'll never get back. That makes no effort to correct the anomaly. Having identified it, you would have thought the next logical move would be say, right, well, we recommend that all those positions be declared vacant and those positions be advertised, and even the people that are there can apply for them. They might be quite suitable. But having people that have got jobs that they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, don't know how to do the job they're getting paid a salary for, and we don't know what those salary levels are, by the way, is a pretty ordinary state of affairs. And that is a terrible reflection on the system, if you like, of the state politic.
Yeah, even when we see the Auditor General come out and say that Andrews has misspent $13 million of taxpayers' money on what was deemed to be political advertising, and Andrews' response was, well, that's an opinion. If the Auditor General has an opinion and the Ombudsman has an opinion, at what point do we need something in place to be able to charge or take action, Ivan? That's
one of the big anomalies with our system, is that we've got no way, or I believe there is a way, but I don't believe that they're prepared to make people accountable for their actions. I think that what we're going to be recommending in the Watts series of, I think I'm up to number 5 or something of the analysis, and on our website, and that'll go through to about 10, I think. In one of the recommendations I think we'll probably be making towards the end is that all of these services, integrity services, ought to be brought in under one umbrella. We have a number of them, and I've got to say that I don't know very much of any of them following through and achieving prosecutions. Yes, it is true that IBAC has a number of prosecutions to its credit, but the major one in recent memory was in the Education Department rorting, which could have been handled just as easily by the police fraud squad. But to actually unearth and prosecute people for corruption, they're pretty light on. A lot of the stuff that they've had a success with has been pretty low key. And I think that there needs to be a coordination of all these services that we've got out there, so that rather than pour heaps more money at any particular one, bring them all together, coordinate, have one set of administration and have one set of rules and operate under that. And then the management of that facility can then direct the resources where it's most effective. Because when you read the Watts report, for example, at the view that I have formed in reading it is nobody's going to be held to account for what's happened. And that's fairly clear. What in one particular area that they were talking about red shirts and the branch stacking. In the area of branch stacking, that the IBAC and Ombudsman's investigation of that process, that's the third time that's happened. Now, if you've got a tree and you trim it around the edges, that's called pruning, and that tree will grow bigger and stronger next year. Well, what they've done is they've pruned corruption. They continue to. No, that you do not see them moving in, taking out the roots and the branches so the trunk of the tree corruption dies and withers. No, what will happen is in 5 years' time, we'll have a repeat saying, oh, well, we had the RACS investigation, we had the IBAC investigation, and there was one before that. Look at that, we've still got branch stacking, or we've still got corruption in our government parties. And until they start taking some action for which there are consequences, this will just continue on unabated.
Yeah, and the ability for them to have their hearings in private doesn't inspire confidence. And when the Chief Information Officer, Sven Blumel, says that the whole system needs an overhaul because what he wants to release is then fought tooth and nail through VCAT to suppress it. What hope do we have when we can't be informed?
Well, that's right. I mean, I have a view that the public inquisitions are akin to something like the medieval stocks. So those people are put through that mechanism without ever having been convicted of any crime relative to what they are being interviewed about. And the damage that public exposure can be horrendous on people. And remember, we've already had a former mayor in Casey who took her own life because of the problems, because of the pressure created by IBAC on her. That was the allegation. And I understand, although I've not been able to track it down, there was another person in Queensland also took that option after being investigated by the CCC up there. Now, I can't wear that. I mean, if the organisations like IBAC and they have all these powers, they can interview people in secret. And I really don't have a problem with that. You don't get to hear the interview between a police member and a suspect, as you shouldn't. But the issue is that once the interviews and the process is completed, a brief of evidence is compiled, and then either they prosecute or they don't. Now, the police member, not the organisation, the police member has a discretionary power at common law as to whether to prosecute. So if the police member decides to prosecute, really it's then the next person that has any discretion is the DPP. But these people are doing these things and they're not putting forward the brief of evidence to the DPP for consideration, the Director of Public Prosecutions. They're only half doing the job. They're interviewing people in secret, fine. They're getting admissions, as they released in the Watts document. There were a number of admissions made by the Premier, fine. They've put it out in the public there, a bit unfair on him, I think, but nevertheless, that's what they did. But there's no prosecution, and using words like, well, he wasn't really offending, he was immersed. I think they ought to go to a dictionary and look at what the word immersed means, because that's a bit like arguing Tony Mockbell was only immersed in the drug cartels and presidents of outlaw motorcycle clubs are only immersed in the activities of their club. So that's nonsense. But they need to finish the job, put these people before the courts, and that's where the public finds, that's the transparency. Goes before the court. If the court finds with the court process that the person's not guilty, fine. That means either they're not guilty or the prosecution hasn't done its job properly. And that's happens all the time. That example exists all the time. But at least the public's aware of it. But when you've got bureaucrats making these decisions basically on guilt and innocence, I think that's a very, very bad precedent.
Well, hopefully this November there'll be a message sent, whether it's clear and concise and telling, or whether it's, you know, we're happy to accept this. So Ivan Ray from the CAA, thanks so much for your time.
No worries. Thank you.